Cool. We are live. Welcome everyone to the 5th event of the Solana Wormhole Hackathon. We're kind of doing a continuation of our DeFi discussion. On Monday, we recapped the past few months in decentralized finance world, and this panel is going to be about the future. We're going to be talking about how we expect the next few months of decentralized finance to look, kind of what the future of governance looks like, layer 1 versus layer 2 scaling, and everything else these folks get into and they discuss. So I don't really think anyone here needs an introduction. I will let Toly kind of handle quick roundabouts of everyone, but thank you to everyone who attended. And if you want a full list of all of the other upcoming events, visit solana.com/hackathon. The panel will last about an hour. And as a reminder, we have a chat section where y'all can kind of leave general discussion, and then we have a questions tab. So if you have any questions for the panelists during this chat, leave them in there, and we'll take the last 10 minutes. We'll highlight the question, and everyone will take turns answering it. So I think with that, Toly, I'm gonna toss it over to you. Jump off stage, and everyone have fun.
Awesome, thank you, Austin. So I'll kind of I think we'll do like a brief round of intros, just like one sentence about yourself, and then we'll kind of start to get into the meat of it. I think I'll go in the order as you guys appear on my screen, which is randomly decided by Livestorm. So, so Sam is first. So you want to just 2 seconds, 2-second intro.
Yeah, I'm Sam. I run Alameda and FTX and Serum and I don't know, apparently distressed projects at large when that needs to be.
Tegan.
Hi everyone, my name is Tegan Kline. I come from traditional finance, so investment banking at Bank of America, sales and trading at Barclays, and now I'm helping to kind of pave the way forward for DeFi at the Graph, which is an indexing and query protocol that many DeFi applications are built upon.
Awesome. I think Michael, you're next. Michael?
Sorry, yeah. My name is Michael. I'm the founder of Curve, market maker for stablecoins. And yeah, I guess that will be it.
And Stani,
I'm Stani. I'm the founder and CEO of Aave, which is a decentralized money market protocol in Aave for lending and borrowing, so to earn yields on your deposits.
Awesome. And I'm Anatoly, co-founder CEO of Solana. Been building a high-performance layer 1 for 2.5 years now. So awesome to have you guys here. And like as Austin mentioned, this is about kind of the future of
hey, can you give me some water? Give me some water for me. Give me some
so
water.
I kind of want to let you guys hit this off. To start off with this is, does my daughter need water faster than we're going to get adoption in DeFi? Or I guess in the next, to kind of rephrase that question, what are we seeing as like the next near term kind of like breakout things in the space?
Yeah, I mean, as always, I think scaling matters just a ton. I think that it matters right now. Clearly Ethereum as it exists right now has run out of room to scale already. But I also think that the long-term vision matters a lot, and the difference between 100 and 1,000 and 10,000 and a million and a billion TPS matters, and there are different visions for that. And they sort of imply different things about what DeFi is going to look like. But I think figuring out that problem is both going to be really important for its own right, and also have a lot of implications for everything else. I mean, I think it certainly has had huge implications for Serum, and I'm guessing for most of the rest of you, you have a whole laundry list of things you'd want to do, sort of dependent on how constrained you are on things, sort of long term with what you're doing. So
I echo that. I think that is like the big open question right now is like, how does scaling happen? Does that happen on Ethereum or on a layer 2 or on another blockchain or on a multitude of those? And I think the big problem with multiple blockchains is composability. And I'm hoping that the graph, as we expand to multiple blockchains, we can kind of help with composability so that it's easier for app developers to interact with different chains without needing to really understand like the low level differences between chains.
What do you think, Michael?
Yeah, I think composability for like for the end user application is actually a much easier problem than composability for the transactions happening on chain. And yeah, I don't know what would be a good way to transact on several chains simultaneously. That's I don't even know if there are solutions for that. You could of course do like several transactions and do transaction on one chain, wait, do on the other chain, wait like until it's settled, whatever. But to do like single transaction arbitrage across chains, I think I've never heard of anything like that.
This is something that I thought might be possible if Ethereum was fast enough, you could like within a single transaction get some settlement guarantees from Solana within a single block, but I think that's still probably not something that we should invest engineering time on. We have bigger problems to solve.
Well, maybe Ethereum L2 can interact with Solana.
That is like like we're probably going to talk about optimistic rollups eventually, but I think that technology is almost a perfect bridge solution, more so than even a scaling solution, because the guarantees that you get is that the remote set of like signers that are doing your L2 are not breaking the logic rules of the contract. And if you can maintain those guarantees, then the dependency in the signers, like colluding or even intrusion of those keys, become much lower, right? So you get like a much smaller security surface. I think it's kind of like so I'm super excited about that kind of work, because while folks think that L2 scaling will kill all the other L1s, I think it'll actually make him better.
Is it possible to do it with ZK rollups?
Yeah. Sorry, what?
Is it possible to do it with ZK rollups?
Yeah, there's always trade-offs with zero knowledge stuff that are really hard to quantify. So I'm a poor operating systems engineer, not a cryptographer.
Oh, okay. All right.
So Stani, I kind of like I wanted to ask you this question. Kind of came up with my chat with the comp folks. Is it good enough to take like Aave A tokens or borrow from Aave and move them through Wormhole to Solana and trade them on Serum? Is that like good enough composability? Because this kind of bounces off what Michael said, that from a user's perspective, are they even going to care that there's multiple chains or rollups? They will see like a fancy UI that kind of does it for them.
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, that's a kind of like a short answer for it, because I mean, A tokens are practically interest-bearing tokens, so they're in some way kind of bonds, but also or receipts of the underlying, and the balance of those tokens increases periodically. What's interesting there is that if you bridge those tokens into Solana, and for example you trade them on Serum, you could actually trade the interest rate practically every second, because on the Ethereum the interest rate changes. I mean, it actually is credited every second, and that's done algorithmically, so you don't need transactions there actually. But to swap the position from one A token, let's say AUSDC, to ADAI, and back and forth, that becomes more interesting, where you can do it more frequently and you don't have that much gas. It doesn't make sense to swap the A tokens and pay, let's say, 20 USD worth of gas, and you will just do it more rare occasions. And here, if you could do it more frequently and in the same way as you would trade fixed income instruments, that would be pretty cool. And the cool part is that the bridging with the algorithmic balances is doable in the way that you could have an oracle that inserts data into Solana, and it's pretty cheap because you don't have the same cost as you would put data through oracles into Ethereum. And basically that gives a lot of opportunities, not just for Aave, but in general. You could put a lot of off-chain data into Solana and all these different applications. I'm pretty sure that we'll see like a lot of this happening during this hackathon as well.
Interesting. So sounds really interesting. Is it possible to even like? I can quite imagine Curve working on Solana with these tokens very quickly. So do you think it is possible to, let's say, swap these tokens while, let's say, somebody deposits something on Aave and that changes interest rates by a lot, some whale coming in, and when you see that in mempool, while it's in Ethereum mempool, you can already swap the tokens in on Solana, so to have it faster than actually Ethereum confirms.
It's a future. It's
yeah. I mean, yeah, I think this is all super exciting. And right now you can do all parts of that except for the trustless bridge between Solana and Ethereum. Like that's the tough part right now. If you ignore that part, like here's one thing I think would be fucking awesome. So like there's a DEX on Ethereum in which you can trade like Bitcoin against USDC, right? Or let's say Ether against USDC. But that could also be an Aave Ether against Aave USDC market. I think you may even have brought this up, Stani. And it's all trust. I mean, it would take someone literally 10 minutes to create this DEX. Like there's tooling for it. It's all open. It's all public. So you can just do it and launch it. And then you'd have a replica of the Ethereum DEX, except everyone gets interest in constantly in all the things there. And you can do a similar thing with Curve. Again, you sort of get the wrappers onto Ethereum. You can have the Curve pool there, but also just anywhere that you see USDC, you could replace it, right? So it's really easy to do those things.
Yeah, you could put Aave tokens, stablecoin tokens in Curve pool on Solana. Take the pool token, which is a kind of US dollar, which is growing even faster because of fees, and put that in an order book to be traded against whatever.
Exactly, and then you just have another Bitcoin USD order book, except it's jacked up with interest from both Aave and Curve simultaneously. And I think that's just like super exciting. And again, it's just not that hard. Like you have to build the Curve pool there, although I think the pools thing we're going to be releasing soon will make some version of these just like super simple to do. Like
the simplest version is not very hard, I think.
Exactly. Like getting governance is hard, obviously. If you have like full governance on Solana based on your token, you have to there's no template for that, although probably someone's going to build one soon. But so yeah, I think these things are super cool. The biggest pain point right now is that I think this is sort of the real truth is right now every cross-chain protocol of any sort is sort of in this gray area, like anything, and there's a spectrum, but these are all sort of like variants on like a multi-sig wallet. And the question is just like, do you have some developed node system of multi-sigs? Do you have like a guy who has the one signature? Do you have like, between like WBTC or REN or whatever? But as
so a layer, a layer one in itself is a multi-sig.
Right. Yeah, a layer one is sort of right. But there's building sort of like the closest you can get to trustless movement across this barrier. It's not that hard. Like it's hard. It's really fucking finicky. And I mean, I probably some of you guys know more about this and I have thought more about it. But like, you can convince yourself it's easy until someone says the word fork. And you're like, oh God, how is my trustless on-chain protocol going to detect a contentious fork in one of the 2-layer ones and decide what to do? And like what this thing is, okay, so like but you can get if you put in a lot of effort to get the edge cases right, you can get pretty close there. Even without that, though, right now with the sort of like okay bridges that exist, easy to use, but like, you know, only moderately decentralized, everything else you can do, and it's just super exciting. And I think, yeah, like this.
There's also some like, I think, cool I think overlooked shortcuts for now, which is I think like partly where the graph comes in, is like this idea of like just migrating, like computing the data, the state of Ethereum, right? And giving some kind of guarantees about that state through a network like the graph, right? Like,
So
I think, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no.
Go ahead.
I was setting this up for you, Tegan, so I want you to kind of roll with it.
Yeah, I was going to say, you know, that is one thing that the graph does. And I think that that'll be even more important when we have like sharded blockchains, just so that you can kind of identify the data and serve that data to your users without having to think a lot about the underlying blockchain. And I think that is another form of like interoperability, which is kind of more of a speculative use case of the graph, but you could imagine the graph being like the source of truth for some oracles. And that's kind of similar to what we've seen like with Chainlink, the Chainlink use case with Ethereum, but it could also apply across multiple chains.
Right. So like the graph is sort of the opposite of an oracle. Like an oracle takes off-chain things and writes it to chain. The graph takes on-chain things, writes it off-chain. What are you guys thinking about in terms of like you know, completing that loop for cross-chain stuff?
I think that it will be a lot of partnerships with folks like Chainlink that do partake in the Oracle space. So we have that partnership. So now any Chainlink Oracle data can be indexed and queried by the graph. And so we'll just continue that. And we have other like Scale is another partner that's a layer 2. And then we'll be announcing another exciting one soon.
And how about the other way? Like, can Chainlink consume data from the graph as an Oracle feed?
I'm not sure about that one, potentially.
So to me, that is actually like a hard engineering problem to implement inside the chain. It is kind of a very dumb thing that when you think about it, like I have this box, right, that has a bunch of state, but it's very expensive for that box to go look at every bit in the box and give you an answer, right? Especially if you're just looking at the current state is expensive, but even more expensive is to like look at the current state as it changes over time, right? Or like go look up, is this transaction part of the history, right? Like those Merkle proofs or building that stuff is just enormously like hard and slow and costly, right? And like something like a network that is, you know, partially trustless or externally trustless where some verifiable MPC, right? The cool thing about it is it can like run computations that everybody can verify, and then it can guarantee the state and feed it back into the state machine. And then we can do like cool stuff, right? Like to me, this is like I think the exciting thing about like composability is like taking stuff like the graph and like mixing it in between networks. Like that's kind of like what I'm excited about as an engineer.
Absolutely.
I'm like, I don't know. I'm just like, I think like the space is like kind of blossoming into like, I think like we went from like really basic stuff in 2017, like that barely worked. And like a bunch of people got heads down and like worked their asses off. And now we have like, I think very sophisticated tools that do really kind of like magical things that I think are still like now have the opportunity to grow and like really gain adoption.
Yeah, I still remember those days when we run our own Oracle. It was like whenever there's like, you know, maintenance issues, like it's pretty much like the Oracle.
Yeah, I mean, FTX, to be clear, entirely does that. Like when you're developing a centralized application, one thing we've learned again and again and again is that modularity is just bad. Trying to use third-party services is just bad. It's just a mistake, unless you're going to go all in on one. Like if you're going to be like, this is our whole thing, then it completely makes sense. And I think that like a white label is an example of that, where like, yes, we're going to fucking make this integration work. But like they sort of like, yeah, you know, and it'll kind of integrate there with this thing. Don't do it. And the reason is just like, it doesn't fucking work. Like, and these conversations all break down in the same mysterious ways, which someone's like, sorry, we need your developers to work on stuff. we're like, what you mean? Literally, our front end just like consumes our API feed. It's a public API feed. Provably, you can do the same things we can do. They're like, no, you don't have like P&L data. We're like, yes, we do. Like, not over WebSocket. Like, to be clear, you need to be streaming monthly P&L figures every 100 milliseconds. Like, that's your use case, and like, that's what we need. And we're like, no, you don't. They're like, yeah, we do. And like that's the problem with the integration. Like, there goes your integration. You know, you're like, either you're gonna fight through that or you're not. But DeFi kind of turns that on its head. First of all, because you have to do these things. But second of all, like, everyone has already agreed before it all started to use the same, or at least everyone on the same L1 has already agreed to use the same interfacing for everything, right? Which is like the blockchain. And so when you think about composing with another thing, it's just so much fucking easier because you're all speaking the same language. You're all running on, like, you know, the same system, and such. Just like they forcibly had to give you everything you could possibly use because it's all open, and because it's all, you can look inside the various boxes. You can just prove what's going to happen, and you don't have to worry about what if they just start returning garbage data for a reason that like no one can tell. You're like, no, it can fucking read their code. Like, I know what it's going to do. You know, it's like I can actually compose it exactly the way it's supposed to. And so, yeah, I mean, on-chain composability is just so much cleaner and purer and more powerful than off-chain composability is.
And this is the difference between the Web 2 and Web 3 completely. Like, basic, there is one style. Well, there's of course many things you can do, but basically, I mean, once you deploy something, you can just interact with everything. You know, not just kind of like, you don't have the mess what Sam explained, but also kind of like you can actually access anything that there is, unless there's like some sort of like permissions. But in by default, it's all there. You know, it's like browsing the internet as an end user. Now, as a developer, you can just build anything, you know, and products that didn't exist before.
Absolutely. It's like this open data layer, and then people are building on top of that data, and then other applications are using their data to build more applications, and like it's this positive feedback loop that I think is only going to continue, and we're going to see like this waterfall effect from like Web 2 into Web 3 now that it's so much easier to build in this space.
Yeah, 100%. I think the data set was actually one of the things that me as like when I used to trade, like my like really crappy algorithms against interactive brokers, I never had enough data to like actually verify them. And having all of this like really cool, sophisticated financial information just be open by default, I think is really like eliminating like the insider advantage. So I'm excited about that.
Totally. I mean, I think like what Bloomberg Terminal, right? We all used it in finance. It's like just closed data, like, and they have an IP on that data. Like, why? And then they're like a billion-dollar company, billions of dollars. So now we're opening that up. But that is one thing I am excited to see in the DeFi space. Paul, you asked this earlier, is like the Bloomberg for everything. You know, because right now it's so fragmented. You go to trade and you're on many different platforms. And I think, Sam, you're probably working on this, but that is one thing I'm really excited about, is having like a one-stop shop to do everything.
Oh yeah. One thing that, like, here's a task that someone's working on right now on Serum, just a fucking search bar that, like, I mean, you can put in your app and you want, and I think fucking everyone should, where it's just like, there's like a list of all the apps people have built, and you just like type it in and then like, you know, switch quickly between them. That's not the best way to do it. Like, it's sort of like whatever, but it's better than nothing, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, like a whole app store, or like whatever this like, you know, whatever the form of it is, something to like make it less of a mess would be great. Like, yeah, no, I think that would like really simplify things. Also, okay, here's the thing I think is super cool. I don't know what other people think is really fucking awesome. Is like, one cool thing about throughput is you can just do things that seem like hilariously impossible on blockchain, but at some point they become possible. I think one key example is like, how about an instant messaging service where all the messages are encrypted and on chain? You can actually do that on Solana. Like, you can social networks, like could you have a social network fully on chain? Yeah, you could. And I think it'd be really cute if like the Bloomberg of crypto from the chat functionality, was an on-chain product. I think that would be fitting. But I also think it just sort of like opens the door to like, it's not just trading. Like a lot of things can theoretically be on chain.
Yeah, I mean, there's like, if you think about it, like even like, stuff like a lot of data and transactions stuff, for example, like things that is happening, for example, in ride sharing or these big platforms with multiple transactions in small area, it's kind of there's like, I think we had a chat yesterday with Anatoly, and what was interesting is that kind of like what I think in this hackathon especially, like we'll see some of the use cases will be completely different than on Ethereum, mainly for the reason that actually you have this scalability and high frequency. So you could actually develop stuff that you otherwise will not think building on Ethereum, or maybe we'll do it on layer 2 or whatnot, and that's still not very feasible. So I think what happens is that we'll see a bit different kind of ecosystem on Solana, which is based on this kind of like high frequency stuff, and probably we'll see a lot of finance. But I think there's also kind of like use cases where you just have massive amounts of transactions, and now you have actually like a immutable register of it and contracts, and this is going to be a very interesting ecosystem in that sense.
So my feeling is that like the consensus part is like just like implementation details, and like the real powerful thing is the cryptography side of it. Like we don't live currently in a world where people outside of crypto can sign things and like guarantee that, hey, I signed this, right? Like BGP email was like a thing that like two geeks tried to make work and nobody used it, right? but I think crypto can actually change that, and to me that is like a not a security privacy thing, but I think it's like incredibly empowering, because we now can do things like governance, do things like, if you have 100 million people that have cryptography and cryptographic identities, we can build a credit system on top of that, and like we can do things that like are done outside of crypto but internally in this world. So to me that is kind of like opens up the door to new things, like and that's super exciting. I'm wondering, how do you guys view like governance in general? Like personally, I think the governance stuff that we see today is like the 6 degrees of the 90s. Like it's going to be something that is much bigger than you expect. But like, I'm just wondering what your take on it is.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I think, probably before today, governance wasn't really much much utilized, or wasn't really going beyond some theater rather than a real thing. But right now, in many protocols, it does become a real thing, and it does become decentralized. And I think firstly it will apply in like these DAOs, in like DAOs which drive different projects, but it probably could go beyond that. It could have social implications.
Yeah, and I think for us, I mean, it was a big day today. We practically gave the admin keys to the community, to the Aave token holders. I mean, it really feels good. I mean, in the sense that you're not like with your team, kind of like in control or making those decisions. That now there's actually a big group of people and anyone can be part of that. It really feels good. And I mean, probably today I feel that governance is more powerful than I felt yesterday when this happened. But also I think the magnitude that is going to be, and also like the programmability and rest of the functionality, it will be pretty interesting to see, like, and how it would maybe like how would it spill over into the, you know, like, let's say if you need to decide something related to real world, and how this kind of on-chain governance could spill over in those places.
I think it's really admirable of a lot of the founders in the blockchain space. I think it's very different than most founders in the traditional space, because you have to be able to really like give away your protocol and your project. But I think like governance is still a massive experiment, and that experiment's in progress. And like the graph has taken a different approach from like having a governance token to instead kind of finding product market fit, and then releasing, you know, and then decentralizing the network. And then we're going to have like a technical council that oversees our foundation, but we kind of moved away. We're not doing like a governance token, like a compound would.
These are like pretty tough and hard decisions to make, and it's pretty early. Like I think like a layer one is by definition its own governance token, because those are the people that decide everything, right? Like, so, but like the fundamental consensus part. So that's something kind of like that was kind of baked in from the start. But as things move up the stack, it's really interesting to me how people experiment with this. I like one thought that I had, like when I talked, like Vitalik was talking about this like 2 years ago. I feel like he's always just like way like a bit ahead of everyone. Like it, and I thought that it's interesting to see that if like a community based around like a token can develop faster than like a corporation, because there's less politics. In a lot of ways, like it's like an incredibly flat organization.
I think that there's a lot of things that often get bundled together, and I think it's maybe worth unbundling some of them or at least thinking about them separately when it comes to governance. And for a lot of reasons, this term governance token has just come, it's this euphemism. You know, people say it and people are like, oh yeah, it's one of those things. But like there's actually like a pretty wide set of disparate things that go into that, all sort of joined by the fact that if it has full governance rights, then technically could have anything else because you just vote for it. But you know, there's one thing of like the value of the platform flows through the token holders one way or another, which I think is like important to have at least some piece of. Otherwise, what's this token doing? Why like there's you know, the sort of when you think about governance, like you know, I think that one question is like, can someone build something new, or does that need to get approved by governance? There's another question of, can you modify something existing without governance, with governments, not even with governance? Like that's sort of like a separate question. And I think they're quite distinct. And I think that like the place that certainly Serum has been trending, that I think a number of people, I think Vitalik has said that, and maybe Hayden have expressed that they like this vision, although I'm not totally sure, is like, I think there's a huge difference between releasing new things and editing existing things, because one is sort of like dangerous. One could steal people's money sort of in a way that the other doesn't. And so I think that like, it's way more important to be super scared of like modifications to existing protocols, especially once people are already using, have money in. Like one of the modifications could be like, all the money goes to this address, for instance, versus like someone launches, you know, a new thing that's like no one's using right now, people could choose not to use. And I think like one vision of governance is like anyone build whatever they want, but like maybe you need some strong governance in order to modify it. Maybe you can only do it in certain ways which are predefined to like make sure they can't destroy shit. You know, sort of finding places where you really need governance, where as opposed to places where you can just say, yeah, anyone can build what they want and let the market decide what it wants to use. You know, places, and I think like another example of this is like naming conflicts, right? That's like a great use for governance, right? I think that's something we've been thinking about on Solana, is like, what is, you know, can everyone call themselves Sol, the Solana token?
Yeah.
Like is that a name everything can say? And like you have this token, you're like, is this Sol? Like, yeah, it's Sol. So like, but is it the Sol? Like, you know, and so I think that's another thing where like having a governance like vote on like, no, that's Sol, this thing you can't call it Sol, you know, anything else but not Sol, I think would be like another kind of reasonable, you know, use for it.
The domain, the DNS, right, is the hardest problem on the internet, right? Like it, and it is one of the hardest problems of blockchain too, in an interesting way.
Yeah, we created Everest, which is kind of like a passion project we did on the side. And it's kind of, I like to use the analogy that it's like the LinkedIn for the blockchain space. So we wanted to make Web3 more tangible. And so any application that exists in Web3 can exist on Everest. And then there's kind of like a reputation system. So that could probably also work with like the tickers of projects too.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah, that I think is like part of the human world. I think is just that information is going to seep into the chain and kind of be usable. So that's kind of pretty interesting. What do you guys have? Do you see like the space maturing like into something where there is a Bloomberg terminal of crypto protocols? It's got to, like, how far away? I know it's coming, but like how far away is that? Or is it already here? Like, I just don't know because I'm in the latency weeds.
We saw something like using the graph, like creating an open API, a subgraph for NFTs. And so like NFTs it was very fragmented. And then someone created a subgraph that put them all together so that they could see all of their NFTs in one wallet. So I think it's not that far away. I think that you could do the same thing with DeFi, with everything that exists in the space. But we need like the Robin Hood of crypto.
Yeah, I think, it's always been interesting. Like I mentioned this maybe like few dozens of times. It would be cool to have just like a, terminal where you just write, Aave, deposit, 100 DAI and it goes to Aave. Then you might have something like, Curve, deposit 100 DAI and so forth. Or like Flash loan, Aave. And, this kind of things, and I think this could be quite interesting because like people could plug into this terminal and do commands, and practically this could be like an interesting way to get some adoption as well. Maybe someone could build this on this hackathon. I tried to pitch this a couple of times on the Ethereum hackathon, so maybe someone who is very hardcore on Solana could actually pull this.
I like to. There's a question that's kind of related to this, like for Sam, like how hard would it be to take the FTX UI and point it at Serum?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's so right. It's complicated. So it depends on exactly what you mean by the FTX UI, because some parts of the UI make no sense in the context of Serum. So you'd have to cut those, like most of the work is cutting out the parts that don't make sense in that context. You'd have to think about like who manages risk, for instance. Is it like if there's like margin on both, is it like an FTX risk engine? Is it a Serum-based risk engine? Like there's a lot of places where you're trying to decide what draws the line. If it's literally just the GUI, so like the FTX isn't making any decisions, just a GUI, nothing is theoretically hard about it. It's just a ton of toiling. Like it's a ton of like, okay, here are like 3,000 different features of it, and like 2,000 of them need to be tweaked, not in a fundamentally existential way, but in like like it's not hourly funding. Like let me like clean up that part. Okay, now on to number like 1,253 of the things to clean up. So it's, again, theoretically it's not hard, but you almost might want to like just rebuild it with the same design philosophies, because there's going to be so many tweaks that like you're just going to end up rewriting a lot of the raw code. Although it's going to be important to have all the instincts from having built it, so that you sort of like have thought through a lot of the things that come up and have like tools in your toolkit for it. But there's nothing theoretically hard about it. It's just lining everything up and making sure that it that you've like cleaned up all the differences.
So like, I think the underneath that question is this like theoretical idea. Can you take like a centralized service like FTX and make it fully decentralized? And Or like, do we have enough of the pieces there? Like,
yeah, you can do it.
Can you like borrow from Orchid on Serum and like plug that into the UI?
It's like all the fundamental pieces are there, or sorry, almost all. I'll just fucking say what I think all the pieces are. I spent a lot of time thinking about this. Here's all the pieces. Here's like the set of primitives, and if you have all of these, you have everything. Not everything, but you have almost everything in finance. You need a matching engine, which exists on Serum. You need a borrow lending protocol, which does not currently exist on Serum. There's a lot of people theoretically building one. We'll see what happens there. Obviously, like if Aave ported over, that would do it. Like that works. But you need some way to get borrower lending or leverage or whatever. That's another fundamental protocol. You need a price. You need a stable coin basically. You kind of can't do any of this without at least a stable coin, there's USDC on there. Obviously, you can kind of like get jacked up USDC with like lots of yield and stuff, and or combine multiple ones through Curve or something like that. So there's a lot of improvements you can make on that. But you need something like that. You need an Oracle, probably. Basically, you need an Oracle system to make this work, but it doesn't actually even need to be an off-chain Oracle. It can be 100% on-chain. You can just be feeding spot market order book prices back to themselves, basically. So you can do this all without leaving chain. You don't need anything that you need to trust, but you do need to build that system. And you need that for liquidations, for instance, for the borrow lending protocol. But again, you can just use the spot order books on Serum. Once you have those, you can just do it. You need to tie everything up together. You need to compose them the right way. You're all composing on chain. You don't need to leave the chain at any point. The GUI needs to understand obviously what commands need to be sent. But once you have those, you have everything. And like a cool thing, you can build futures out of a borrow lending protocol. It's like kind of a fun fact. It's not actually a different thing. There's a lot of variance on this, a lot of modifications you can do. You might want to pool primitive both for borrow lending, but also like there are a lot of things where like collective action is like kind of central to something and it makes it way fucking easier. But yeah, you can just do all this, and it's nothing here is magic. It's all things people have done before, just doing them all on the same fast L1, and composing them correctly and having the GUI do the right thing. And then you have basically close to everything. Maybe for a little bit more, how about leverage tokens? Or structured products, right? Or algorithmic hedge funds, or whatever the fuck you want to call them. Yeah, you can do it. You have a pool, you have an on-chain pool, you program the rebalancing, whatever it's supposed to do. You have it trade on an order book to do its rebalancing. You have creations, redemptions. That's just like AMM, LP, adding or removing liquidity. And now you have that. That's what the product is. The LP tokens are the fund. And you can just take those LP tokens, trade them on the DEX, and now you have structured products. You have ETFs, mutual funds, whatever you want, and that's sort of what the pool primitive is like based around. You want yield? Yeah, you already have that. You're just dropping in these pools. Whoever you're trying to give yield to, have them all, be LPs to the same pool and drop it wherever in the pool on the LP token, same thing. The pieces are all there. It's just putting them all in the same place and composing them all together and having the right GUI for it. And you could actually have something that feels like a fully featured crypto financial ecosystem all on chain, and it just like works.
I hope this is recorded because there are like 20 startup ideas in that like 2 minutes.
Oh, it could fucking do this. Like, honestly, I'm not trying to take, like, I want other people to do, there's too much fucking work for any one person to do. Like, it's like, yeah, sure, we could try and build a borrow lending protocol if we have to. Like, way rather Aave do it. They've done it before. They know how to do it. And also, also if users also then like, we can work on other things and like, combine it all together. And so like, this is, the more people build things, this is the fucking power of DeFi. The more people build these things, you just compose them and you get the power of them all put together no matter who built them. And it's not like you have to reduplicate them all yourself. And so, that's going to be the next big sprint on Serum, I think. is going to be people building out all the primitives and then composing them together.
Tegan, do you think like the days for your friends at like Barclays and Bloomberg are kind of numbered?
Oh, it's like a lot of them are calling me asking how they can get into crypto. So I think that's a good signal. But yeah, I'm excited to pull a lot of that into this space and yeah, build for them.
I find that like the folks coming out from finance are smart and ambitious and like hardworking and have a good attitude. So like I think it's like overall a good thing, and like brings like a new perspective from like the California engineers that are at least dominant on the West Coast kind of like crypto community.
Yeah, I think so. They've gone through a proper hazing of banking.
Yep.
Yeah.
How worried are you guys about like the stacking of the technical risks of like borrowing one token from one smart contract into another one, into a third one, putting that into a spot market and leveraging that, and like a single rounding error causing some unforeseen consequences?
Quite worried.
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah.
Really
Oh, yeah. Let me just say that, like, as someone who also runs a centralized exchange, like, the thought of not being able to have human sanity checks and of open sourcing all of the code is fucking terrifying. Like, it's just so fucking impossible to cover all of the edge cases perfectly beforehand. It's like so many things are like, okay, if anything that kind of like this happens, like, just stop and like freeze and like alert like the core developers and require a few people to sign off on this thing before like this withdrawals process, because like that's kind of sketchy. Like, you just like fucking need that. Every exchange has them. Like, you wonder like, oh, why is this withdrawal in particular taking a while? It trips some fucking risk parameter. Who knows what? Probably it's nothing. Like, probably it's a false alarm. Like, you know, that's the core of it. And we're sort of like, oh god, like everyone who tries to penetrate exchanges is so dumb. Like, they're doing such a bad job of it. But of course they are. Like, A, they have to get through all these heuristicy things. B, they don't know what's going on inside. And you're like, nah, you get none of those. You write the code once, never change it, never patch any bugs, no human intervention, no sanity checking, and it's all open source. So people can just read it and see exactly what you're doing, exactly where your edge cases are. And like, you know, I mean, writing the fucking serum decks, like writing a matching engine would have been like a 1 week project, but instead it's a 2 month project. And why was that? It was like every fucking edge case had to be covered, right? Like, there are days that were spent with like, oh god, what if someone sends a number that's too big in this very specific space 10 times in a row, and they overload this buffer, and then we start overwriting old memory on chain with this other thing, and like, is that an attack vector, or at least a vector for someone to be able to brick the, you know, the market?
Is it what programming on smart contracts on Solana feels like?
It's what doing something really intricate on chain feels like. Like, there's just like AMMs are not, building an AMM on Solana is not like this at all. The tricky thing is that when you go to an order book, it's not conceptually complicated, but there's just a lot of moving pieces. And every moving piece is an attack vector, right? Like, the problem is that, like, you know, there's this place that things go after they've been matched while the matching engine is still running in a way that like doesn't apply to an AMM. And you're like, okay, we got to make sure this queue can never get overloaded no matter what happens.
All right. Yeah, I think you advertised AMMs to me enough.
Yeah,
I will stick with AMMs.
But the cool thing is, the beauty of like smart contracts is that once somebody builds it and it works, and it's been working for like 6 months, 8 months, 9 months, a year, people are like, okay, we've kind of exhausted all the possible bugs, and this is like a service. Right, it goes from like an experimental thing to like just from
certainly. Yeah, it certainly helps. I would say I was surprised with two things in blockchain world. One thing is actually well, depends on the time, but at least in April, I found a bug in one Curve smart contract while everyone was successfully migrated, but I was a little bit shocked that nobody else found it because it was actually a pretty simple one to detect. At the same time, I'm positively shocked with the number of white hats in the blockchain space, because like I don't know, it feels like more than half of people who find exploits, they're actually white hats, and even black hats. Like if you take their harvest hack on this Monday, attackers somehow stopped at 25 million. I don't know what was their harvest total value lock. Was it like close to 1 billion or something? So it was something large, I think. And so it feels like attacker took 2% of TVL and stopped, but could have taken much more. I don't know. It's like is it some is it? Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, I've thought a lot about this. I have two thoughts on it. First of all, yeah, I'm always confused. Like, three thoughts maybe. I often have the same feeling of like, geez, like that was super unambitious. Like, if you're gonna be a fucking sleazeball, like the sleazeball who's also unambitious and has a conscience, it's a weird. I don't know what the. The second thing is decreasing marginal utility of money. I think some people are like, I got $20 million. That's all I need for life. I couldn't possibly want more. Like, I'm not gonna like that. My goal is just to get away with it. But the third thing, and I think this is one of the key things, is if you try and do anything too big, you start running into issues you didn't see. And I think a KuCoin hack is a good example of that, right? Like the KuCoin hacker stole almost too much of some tokens. They stole so much that it would have been fatal, and the tokens forked. They just hard forked away from the hacker's token, right? If the Harvest hacker had actually taken like $1 billion, I don't know that they get anything. Like, I think there's this paradoxical thing where they take too much and people pull these levers they really don't want to pull, but they're just mutually destructive, but that they have to pull if it's too big. And we've seen this again and again.
Do you think that like the Ethereum miners would like fork off?
At some point, I mean, look, like you steal $20 billion of Ethereum, yes. There's a point at which they will.
So
if you think about it, like in Ethereum, there's like even like the black hackers, they're kind of like white hackers, but they just need a house or something in that particular moment, so they don't steal everything. But also, like, I mean, if you're talented, you don't want to hack the whole system. You want to basically keep the system to continue, and that is probably why you don't drain the whole thing. Because I mean, Harvest, if it would be drained completely, that would be devastating the whole DeFi. I don't know, like it could be even like, I mean, it just doesn't affect Harvest. It will affect Curve, Aave, and also those protocols that don't even interact with Harvest or don't have the TVL in their protocols of the Harvest. And if that happens, it might take a couple of years to come back to the point that people are excited about DeFi again. And it's like this serious, actually. Yeah. So I think the hackers are smart in that sense, that they understand probably it as well.
Yeah, well, kind of had the boundary between the hacker and security researcher.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people who are on that boundary. There are a lot of, I mean, okay, I don't know if this is a thing in DEX is. It's certainly a thing in centralized exchanges. There's people whose entire goal in life is to go to centralized exchanges claiming that they found a security flaw and asking for like some money in return for helping them fix it. And like, there's a few people who are really well-intentioned and only find, and like really help the space. Most of these people, they just find some way to DDoS some shitty endpoint no one cares about. And they're like, now pay me for DDoSing you. And we're like, come on, dude.
Yeah,
like,
I actually
you're not.
I did have this experience with Curve, with having one endpoint which collected statistics, and some hacker found it and started DDoSing it and writing me at the same time. So yeah, well, I mean, it was kind of wasn't really it wasn't serving anything really. So yeah, I did see kind of them trying to load it, but kind of quite unsuccessfully, and yeah, it was fun just to see.
Yeah. The coolest thing is often they don't understand. I think they must have bought some of these. They'll like try and describe what they're doing. They're like, no, we know exactly what you're doing. They're like, we found this critical security. Like, no, you're fucking calling this endpoint like 3,000 times a second. And like our rate limits like weren't quite restrictive on us enough on it. Now they are. Like we can fucking see you. And they keep saying they're doing something. I think they just literally don't know what I think they bought it from someone else or something.
3,000 times a second is a good number to call an RPC endpoint.
Yep.
Yeah, I guess cannot overload Solana blockchain with that.
That was a fun challenge of like launching Serum. Was that like things were not things were not tuned exactly to the right parameters. So some of those RPCs were pinging it like 30,000 times a second.
Yeah, I mean, it was this weird experience. We're so used to being limited by the blockchain. The Solana blockchain is basically never a limiting factor for Serum at all. But all the centralized like nodes that someone tried to run, which is immediate, like Serum actually just immediately have it fall over. And like anyone can run these. Like it's like, but you know, it's a fucking server, and like you know, and so that is like you know, it's sort of interesting that like. The blockchain was not the limiting factor on capacity. It was the servers sitting around it providing data.
It's actually a hard problem if you're building a database optimizing it for writes. It's nearly impossible to make it also optimized for reads. You kind of like got to pick one or the other, and blockchains are like writes are the important part. So if you do that, then you're like, what do we do for reads, right? Which is like, I think like you have specialization for like things like the graph or like, you know, other kind of data aggregators become important. There's no like, it's computer science, right? Like stuff, there's no like good answers. There's always trade-off.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any closing words? This was a fun chat. I kind of wish, what I miss about crypto conferences is that like normally we'd be able to go get a beer after this, but might be able to, you know, have a beer on my own. But any closing words for like the future of DeFi?
I mean, I think that the blockchain is the future of the internet, and right now in the middle of that is like this new financial system that we're creating that's expanding, and that's really exciting. But I'm excited to see like all of the internet kind of move over to Web3.
Cool.
Probably more exciting even to see the whole world financial system to move on chain. Who knows which chain though?
Yep. We're all gonna be shocked. It's gonna be some ghost chain from 2016. It's gonna come back and
Mastercoin.
So we're already over time, but there are a few really good questions here in the questions tab that didn't quite get answered. I'm gonna throw like one or two of the top ones up and kind of let y'all take it before everyone jumps off. Let's start with this one. So currently many farm trends are failed to maintain their farm token values. How will you be able to solve it? Are there a sustainable way to maintain the farm token value and attract new people? Ever since zero-sum games is the essence of the crypto world.
I think the big thing is like the fact that you can farm a token doesn't give it value. That's sort of the opposite of giving it value. That's giving it away. That's using its value to get users. In order for a farm token to retain its value, it must have had value to retain. And so I think like the biggest thing I would say is like, why do you think it was ever worth more than zero? If you can answer that question, then maybe you can answer the question of why it's still worth more than zero. And I think that like, if you're farming with like, a token that is attached to a real protocol people actually want to use, right? Then like it has value from that independent of this farming. And like it will retain that. And so I think like, if your farm is dropping like, the tokens of anyone on this panel, I think that like, that's real, But if the only reason that the token exists is so that it can be dropped, then like where's it all going when the farming ends? Yeah, I think
that actually reminds from non-blockchain world. That reminds marketing with, I don't know, paid Facebook ads. You can definitely burn money to bring users via Facebook ads. But the question is, how much money are you burning with that? And there are examples of like electric scooters, startups being bankrupt because of spending all their money on Facebook ads. And the same applies to printing tokens. If the users who you bring, if they don't actually bring value to your platform, then that was pointless. But if they are bringing value to the platform, if that helps you to scale, then that's good. That works.
Cool. Thank you for that. This one's popped up a few times. I think both Sam and Tully have answered before, so I would love to get like a live dialogue on this. But what's more challenging, finding great ideas or finding people to build them?
Finding time to build.
Oh yeah.
Cool. Easy enough.
Yeah.
That actually depends on what the exact idea is. If it can be expressed as a sort of general in general words, as a kind of a idea fully understandable by everyone, if there is nothing special in it, then chances are it's actually execution, which is the more like, if it's like people who build who are more important. But sometimes it could be something really dense and something really so unobvious, then where like the idea part is actually important. So
yeah, I think like that's what's so exciting about like blockchain and protocols is like you don't have to work for a company anymore. Now you can work for ideas, and so you can throw out ideas, and then people can attach themselves to it and then start building it. And so I think we're gonna like flip the Fortune 500 companies on their heads with that.
I think it's finding people, but they have to be the right people, and that doesn't even mean the best people. It means the people who get along with you. Like, I want the best people to build on Serum, but like not all the best people want to build on Serum, especially people who like just can't fucking stand me. Like, yeah, I don't know what to say. If you don't like anyone else building on them, so like it's not just finding good people, but finding people who fit into the particular task and culture and ecosystem is hard.
Yeah, it's like, if you have like, I think there's a lot of good ideas, but you need the right person for it to kind of drive it. I don't know what it is. Like, there's just like, it's not like I could go and build a DEX because that's not my like passion, right? Like I'm more interested in like bits and latency. But it's tough, right? Like it's like a mix. This is like, I think part of the challenge of like ecosystem funds and ecosystems is that they kind of create a list of ideas, and there's like a, if you just put a bunch of money on it, like you'll attract the wrong people, right? You attract people looking for the money, not people that are like inspired by those ideas, and that's I think is like a kind of a why a ton of the ecosystem plays fail.
Yeah, I feel like what you almost want is someone who's like, yeah, I want to fucking do this, and of course there's a lot of money there. It's because it's an amazing idea. Yes, I care that there's money there, but I would have been like offended if there weren't, if I was going to do a really good job on it. Like that's sort of what you want, rather than like, what, you'll pay me to do this thing? Like, sure, I'll pretend to do this.
And I have to agree with actually quite a lot what Michael said about the execution, especially in terms of security, because it's really easy to deploy things, but then again, like I think most of our time is spent roughly like on reviewing things and reviewing like after auditors and before them and during them. So kind of like the people we trust most is our team internally, and that is the difficult part. And that is probably why, especially like when your TVL starts to grow, the more it grows, the slower the development gets. Even if you add more resources, it's just like the stakes are so high that it just requires more measures.
Yeah, I would say that with regards to safety of things, I would once Samsung jokingly said, you know how I make safe smart contracts? I just don't write smart contracts.
Yeah. One thing I'll say we found, I mean, in addition to all the obvious things, is if you don't really deeply understand the thing you're building and why you're building it and why people are using it, you're not going to understand how to make it safe, right? Like you're going to spend all this time on all these things that you think are safety, and then you're going to have like a completely fucked up collateral factor or something like that. And it's like the whole thing goes boom, and you're like, yeah, you know, or, you know, liquidation for, yeah, you know, we let people get within like, you know, 10 bips of bankruptcy before we start, you know, liquidating them on Ethereum. It's like, no, obviously that's going to fail. Like that was your security bug, and it's like enormous and obviously going to fail. And there's just so many things like that, that if you don't have an intuition going into it for like what you should be looking out for, like you might even find all the like bugs, like all the code that won't compile, or like code that will literally not do the actions you intended. But like you're probably not going to find all of the misparameterization. And I think Harvest is a great example of that, right? It's not that the code did something really different than they expected it to. They just never thought hard about like, what if someone stressed it in this economic way? Would that be catastrophically bad? The answer is yeah, it would.
Picking parameters is such a hard problem.
Yeah. It's what cost $300 million of clawbacks in 2018 for derivatives exchanges in crypto. Just all like they just chose the wrong parameters for things. Just like you looked, and like you're a trader, you looked at the like that one's wrong. There'd definitely be clawbacks there.
Yeah, I think Stani, I think that was you in the conversation that said that like people make money by understanding risk, like that like if you have like a really insight about like the risk of the system, then that's where you can actually get alpha.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. Like the most hardest thing about our system is actually the risk, like the risk assessment, and especially when you're dealing with lending and borrowing collaterals. That is where the hard part comes, because you're basically adding assets when the market is going up, but then you have to ensure that when the shit goes down, like the liquidations and everything works, you know, and you don't have this kind of like cascading events, and this is basically what happened in the MakerDAO system, and that was a bug because you could actually place 0 bits on the liquidations, which was problematic. And that is very hard. Like, how do you model risk?
Yeah.
And it's not easy, even in Aave, where we have an actuary and risk department and so forth, and also a bunch of other stuff that we are using as tools. It's really difficult. And with this kind of assets that are quite new and traded in some weird places and less weird places, and you have like decentralized ecosystem as well. It's not the easiest part, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not. Maker is also a fucking time bomb, though. I mean, thinking a lot of people were staring at that for years. Like, if he crashes, that thing's definitely going under. Like, it was sort of a matter of when, not if.
All right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, go ahead if you guys want to keep going.
Yeah, we can close this thing down. I almost like think that like part of this like laissez-faire thing with economics comes from us. A ton of the space being built by engineers first and finance people second. Is that like, you know, like who cares what I set like how many milliseconds the scheduler takes, right, to switch processes in Linux. So it'll be slow for some people, too fast for others. right? It's not like it's not like a big deal, right? Like, and this stuff, when you start building these like higher levels of financial instruments, like that's when things get scary. And like, I don't have the personal experience to have that intuition, right? And
it's worth a lot. I mean, I can say, you know, we get a ton of people saying, hey, do you want to like do something with our protocol? Just like 90% like that's not going to work. It's not going to work. I mean, we just know it won't. It's very far from working. And I do think that the space has actually done a pretty decent job of like the ones that have floated to the top are the ones that like work. And it's probably not a coincidence. Like, I don't think that like, you know, Michael or Stani are like shocked that their protocols worked. I'm guessing they like put thought into it and had like relevant experts and probably had decent instincts themselves on it. You know, and obviously Tegan, but I think that's sort of a given because like the graph doesn't get this sort of freebie of like you're building everything on chain, so people give you a pass if your product is stupid and doesn't work. Like your product always had to work to get traction. So
cool. All right.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm gonna just start like extending the duration of these events like 30 minutes out in all the invites just to be safe moving forward. This was amazing. Thank you, Tegan, for joining. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Stani. Thank you, Sam.